Ciao amici, and welcome back to Experience Italy with Friends. You know, planning a trip to Italy can feel exciting, but also a little overwhelming. There's so much information out there. Where to go, what to see, how to travel, and lately a lot of opinions about the right way to do it. You know, slow travel, off the beaten path, authentic experiences. But what does that actually mean? And more importantly, is it right for you? In today's episode, we're stepping back from specific destinations and talking about how to think about your trip to Italy so that you can design something that truly fits your travel style and what you're hoping to experience. Let's get started. Andiamo! Experience Italy with Friends is a travel and lifestyle podcast where we will explore our favorite destinations and hidden gems, share key travel tips and cultural insights, and provide real-time updates about our move to this remarkable country. Join me, Tanya Razzo, an Italian travel expert and founder of Amici Vacations, and my Italian husband and producer, Davide Razzo, on a journey that is sure to inspire you and prepare you to create immersive and authentic experiences of your own in the beautiful country of Italy. Ciao, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. I'm Tanya, and as always, I'm here with my husband, producer, and co-host, Davide.
Buongiorno, amici.
So today's episode is going to be a little different than our typical destination planning discussion, Davide. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about where to go, what to see, and when to go.
Yes.
But as I've been having more conversations with clients and even reflecting on our own experiences a bit, you know, I realize there's another layer to planning a trip that doesn't always get talked about.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you actually have to figure out the right type of trip for you.
You got it. And, you know, because before you even decide where to go, there are a few important questions to consider. What is inspiring your trip to Italy in the first place? Like, why do you want to come here? Mm-hmm. Is this your first time coming to Italy? Are you someone who likes to explore and stay active, like me? Or are you looking for a more relaxing vacation?
Like me?
Mm-hmm. And, you know, how comfortable are you traveling internationally? And, you know, the answers to these questions really shape the kind of trip that's going to feel right for you.
Yeah, and I mean, people don't always think about those kind of questions.
No, exactly. And, you know, and that's where things can start to get a little overwhelming and maybe confusing. So in this episode, we want to take a step back and talk about how to approach planning a trip to Italy in a way that fits you, not just what you're seeing online or hearing from others. So, but before we get into that, you know, let's start with a quick update from life here in Montepulciano, as always.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much to report. I mean, you know, spring is finally here. We had this cold snap for like 3 weeks.
Wasn't that crazy?
It was. And
it was like winter again.
Yeah. And there were days that was even colder than January or December, I remember.
No, it was so strange. Like we had started wearing light jackets and then pretty soon we were pulling out the winter coats again and wondering what the heck?
Well, and then of course spring came. Finally.
Yeah, I would say like late last week, right? I mean, like warm, like we're at like 70 degrees now.
I know. So, and with that, all the tourists came.
Yes. Well, I always say, you know, tourist season here begins either April 1st or Easter Sunday, whichever comes first.
And speaking of Easter, we had a really nice Easter Sunday. We spent Easter at our friend's place in Castiglione del Lago. Shout out to them.
It was beautiful. And you did some of the cooking. You did a good job.
Yeah, I did. And I wanted to stay some traditionally Italian kind of lasagna and bolognese and a rack of lamb. Yep, it was really good. And John also made some side dishes, the Parmesan cheese, mashed potatoes, green beans. It was fantastic.
It was a lovely long weekend. And I mean, we were very social, which we're not always super social, but we were out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then we were going to settle down on Monday. And I was like, oh, it's Pasquetta. It's still a holiday. So we went out for lunch. But I feel like overall, these last couple of weeks feel like we're really feeling like locals because it was working, shopping, meeting up with friends, like just just living here.
Yeah. But now we have the move coming up.
Ugh.
I know we need to move out from our current apartment, and I'm not looking forward to that. But hopefully everything goes smooth. We hired some movers, and everything will be going to a warehouse. And we're going to stay temporarily into an apartment in Centro Storico as well. And, we're finally getting closer to our apartment. So
we get to be nomads one more time, schlepping our stuff from place to place. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's enough of life updates here from Montepulciano. And, when you talked to me the first time that you wanted to do this episode and talk about what we're going to talk about is, it all started, my clients. And I think that, let's do an episode on their questions and on those trends that people see on the internet about slow travel and off the beaten path and authentic. So
no, it's the perfect setup. So let's dive into the episode because, I think this is one of the most important parts of planning a trip to Italy, and it sometimes get overlooked.
Yes.
And, I want to say that before you even start deciding where to go, I think the real question is, what kind of trip do you actually want to have? And even one step before that, like what inspired the trip in the first place? And this is the question I kind of start off every introductory meeting with my clients, asking is like, why? Like, why now? Why Italy? Was it something you saw? Is it a dream you've had? Is it Under the Tuscan Sun movie? Is it
exactly
a desire to just explore? Or maybe you just really want a great vacation?
Yeah, I completely agree, Tanya. And it's not always places to go that made you choose Italy, but what's the actual attraction? What was attracting to you, right? Maybe, you got inspired by something you heard, like our podcast.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I hope so. We're always trying to inspire, but, seriously, the answer matters more than people realize because it shapes everything that comes after. How fast do you move through the country? Where will you go? How much structure you want? Even how comfortable the trip feels. And, what I see happen all the time is that instead of starting there, people jump straight into research mode.
Yeah, they go online, which is understanding, or they scrolling through their reel feed and they see all these wonderful reels about Italy. And then they join like a lot of the Facebook group pages to help them with the research.
No, exactly. And, they're scrolling Instagram, reading blogs, talking to friends, trying to figure out what they should do. And, that's when they start hearing things like, well, you have to go off the beaten path. Don't do the touristy places. You should slow down. You want something authentic. And, and all of those ideas sound great conceptually, but what ends up happening is instead of feeling more clear, people actually start to feel more confused and more overwhelmed, and then they're looking for some real advice.
Yes, because everyone is giving a different advice, and people, have different opinions and different experiences, and people are promoting what they also see on those reels. So
right, they're following the trend, and and it's not that those ideas are wrong because they're not. Like
no, that's not what we're saying.
No, slow travel can be incredible, and off the beaten path destinations can be amazing, and of course everyone wants an authentic experience. But those aren't one size fits all ways to travel. They're just different ways to experience Italy.
Yes, it always depends on the person.
Of course, everyone is different. And, I think where people get into trouble is when they start planning a trip based on what they're seeing online or what someone else loved, instead of thinking about what actually fits them. Because, the reality is the best trip to Italy isn't the same for everyone.
Right.
It depends on your travel style, your comfort level, your experience, and who you're traveling with. So before we get into any of those ideas, I think it's helpful to break down what they actually mean and how to decide what feels right for you, because they're not just ideas and they're not goals. They're styles of travel, and they come with some trade-offs.
Right. Well, okay, so let's start with maybe with the first trend that we saw, or you saw, was the slow travel one.
Yeah, what does that mean? And, I think if I were to boil it down, it really is about spending more time in fewer places. Staying in one location, the live like a local theme. And, it's about less rushing, fewer checklists, less seeing everything.
So what you are explaining right now is what actual European do when they travel, when they are vacationing, is they go places, they stay in a resort, they come here to Tuscany, they stay at an agriturismo for a week. They're actually, using the pool or using their bikes that they're having at their disposition, I guess. And so that's the slow travel.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think because they're nearby, they've been to Italy many times and they come here to vacation. They come here to relax. And that does result in getting to experience the destination more authentically. But, and that's great if you're a person who enjoys lingering and if you don't need constant activity. But there's going to be less structure in that type of trip, less variety. You need to be more comfortable with downtime. And I think slow travel only works if that pace actually fits you and your expectations for the trip.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
So, I had a client, I just kind of make an example, is they were all set to have this immersive week in Tuscany. But then he started to get anxious and say, oh my God, what are we going to do every day? He wasn't a person who likes to sit still. And the idea of unscheduled time started to create some panic and, quick to put some tours, some structure, see a bunch of different towns. Just hanging at an agriturismo, laying by the pool was oh gosh, what am I going to do with my family for this week?
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like going to a resort in Mexico,
right?
And stay there.
Slow travel is great, but it's got to be for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So the next trend that we or you saw was the authentic travel.
Yeah, let's dissect this a little bit because, what does authentic mean? And it's about experiencing, the real culture and, eating where and what locals eat, avoiding the tourist-focused places and wanting to connect with local people and traditions. And, that's great, but you scroll through the feed and everything is avoid the touristy stuff, find hidden local spots, do what the locals do. And, we don't disagree with that.
No, I agree. And, but it's very difficult to, know where to go.
But also it requires you need to be a little bit more open and curious and be a little bit more adventurous. Things are not going to be as polished, maybe not as luxurious. I mean, Italians living the real life here are doing real things. They're not on vacation.
Exactly.
So it's just your more basics. And when I say adventurous, even just thinking about eating, there's Lamprodotto in Florence we've talked about, and that's very authentic. But, some people might be I'm not going to eat cow's stomach.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to know if you're ready for it. And so, the line from A Few Good Men, we talk about this a lot, you can't handle the truth. I often joke with, clients or friends, everyone says they want authentic, but can you handle authentic? Really? And, I'm all for it. And I really challenge everyone to go outside of their comfort zone, at least a little bit. But authentic isn't always comfortable. So let's just put that out there when you're talking about that trend of just do everything authentic. And you know what? You're on vacation. It's okay to have some indulgences when you travel. And touristy places don't always mean inauthentic or bad quality. It often just means it's popular and therefore crowded and very likely a bit overpriced. But, I see a lot of Italians doing these same touristy things on the weekends with their families, and they're tourists in their own country.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if I can be honest, authentic travel means, hey, I'm going to go to visit some sagre in town, off somewhere in Italy or in Tuscany or wherever, or coming here to Montepulciano for the Bravio. That's when you actually see the authentic locals.
The cultural events.
Exactly. So that's where you eat like a local. You're going to sit next to a local. You're actually experiencing the authenticity of the place you are.
Yeah, and their traditions. And no, I completely agree. And, I'm all for cultural immersion, but I also just want to point out there is no shame in enjoying some of the touristic activities.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they became popular for a reason. So, and then, not everything is great, but not everything is not good either. So,
right.
Okay. The next trend was off the beaten path, which is not always better.
Well, let's just examine that again, too. Like, when you talk about off the beaten path, everyone is saying just basically go beyond Rome, Florence, Venice. Get out to the lesser known towns and regions, avoid the crowds, find undiscovered Italy, go where others aren't going. And, again, nothing wrong with that. Like, I agree with that concept, but you need to know that what that might end up being is that you're in more rural areas. You're going to be where English is less spoken. There's going to be, more simplicity about, the infrastructure, about the services that are offered, and logistics could be a little harder.
Yeah, you might need to drive a car to get to those places.
But you have to, literally go off the beaten path. And so if you think about like that metaphor, it means, it's less traveled. It's less smooth. It could be a bit of a bumpy ride, and you may need a Jeep
maybe
to get through it. And, it's amazing to go to these places, but they're not always easy. You just need to be comfortable with it and confident and a bit more independent. And, also I think it's important to separate these two concepts a little bit more, authenticity versus off the beaten path travel, because they get used interchangeably, but they mean different things. So, Davide, why don't you clarify?
Okay, I guess, authentic is more what people are doing and experiencing a place. And off the beaten path is more where you are. And that often means more rural and simply less traveled.
Right, exactly. So one is what you're doing. Is it authentic? Is it real? Off the beaten path is simply, is it less traveled, more traveled? So keep the concepts a little bit separated. But all three of these trends, I would say, are great ways to travel. They're just not the right fit for every trip or for every traveler. We'll get into that.
Yes, exactly.
So once you start to understand those different styles of travel and what they actually feel like, right? Because it has to be about what they feel like. I think the next step is something that doesn't get talked about very often, and that's your readiness for them. Because, one of the biggest things I've learned over time is that travel, especially international travel, is a skill. Mm-hmm. For some people, a trip to Italy is not just a vacation. It's a big transition, a big leap. And you're navigating a new language, new currency, a different culture. How meals work. Like the content of most of our episodes, a lot of our episodes are preparing you for these cultural differences. But when you're new to all of that, it can feel like a lot, a bit overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. It's a completely different environment that you're getting into it. And I rather be educated than be surprised in a bad way.
No, exactly. But sometimes I think we forget about that, how difficult of a leap it is and what a big transition it is, because we lived in Switzerland. We've traveled a ton to different countries. You learn these things and you get comfortable being uncomfortable and you learn to adapt. And for someone on their first trip, it's like I said, it's a big leap. And that's why I always say, like, you need to ease into this pool of international travel.
Yeah, I would put this analogy before let's say you see a cliff and people jumping off those cliffs and you want to jump as well, right? Because you see people are having fun. So, but before you go and jump off, you want to explore, hey, where am I landing? Maybe then you also want to talk to people that jumped to get some advice and then you jump, right? So that's my analogy on how to do your trip.
Well, I think cliff jumping is a little more extreme than what I had in mind, but...
Yeah, but in a pool, you already see what's below, so...
Go into the shallow end, work your way into the deep end. But if you're more adventurous like Davide, go on to cliff jumping.
There you go.
No, but overall, I feel like it's true. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting with something that feels a little bit more comfortable, a little more familiar, and a little easier to navigate. And because that's what builds your confidence. And then from there, you can go deeper on that next trip.
Exactly.
Okay, so, that's really how I think about planning trips to Italy, that there's not just one right way to do it. It's more of a progression. And because as your comfort level grows and as you get to know the country, the way you experience Italy will naturally evolve. And so I tend to think about trips in 3 stages. Your first trip to Italy,
yep.
Yay. Your second trip, because I warned you won't want to just stop at one. And then everything after that.
Yes, exactly. On a first trip, most people do what we call the classic Italy, right?
Right.
And there's a reason why they do that.
Well, yes, of course. So when we talk about the classics, we've mentioned this before, it's Rome, it's Florence, Venice, Milan, maybe the Amalfi Coast. And so these places, they're known for their history, their art, their architecture.
I mean, those things are centuries old. That's why people come here to see those things.
Right. And they, these are often, bigger cities or just more traveled. And so they have better infrastructure, easier to navigate. They've got the trains, they're really set up to handle tourism. And like you said, these places are iconic for a reason. They've been there for centuries. But I want to say they're still authentic. These are real places. Yep. There's real culture. And they're not less just because they're popular.
Yes, they are iconic and they're very much still authentic.
Right. And so for me, when you go to these more popular places, you don't want to avoid them, but you focus on quality experiences and you make sure you're not rushing through them. When we talked about in our Rome episode, weave in those slower moments and just wander through a neighborhood. And then maybe you want to balance out the trip with a day trip to the countryside, some short stays in Tuscany or at the coast and the mountains. So don't just do hardcore exploring, but, work in some relaxation as well.
Exactly. I mean, you can just sit at the pool at the agriturismo for one day just to enjoy yourself.
Right. Take it in.
Yes. Okay. So then a second trip, Tanya, that then you can start to go deeper. Right?
Exactly. So maybe on that first trip, the goal was breadth, not depth. And now here we're going to reverse that. You're going to go deeper. Maybe you want to spend a week in Tuscany or Puglia or the Dolomites or up at the lake regions. And here you're going to have fewer destinations, but longer stays. And there's less pressure to see everything.
Yes. I mean, there's less FOMO.
Right. Because I think that's a key thing what people are when they come here, maybe for the first time and go a little bit longer. It's great, but then they always have this nagging little voice in the back of their brain of, but should you be seeing the Colosseum? Did you really want to miss the Duomo in Florence? Did you want to miss the gondolas in Venice? And oh my gosh, I'm sitting at the pool and this is great, but. And so again, this is depth versus breadth, but this is where you can relax more if it's your second trip because you don't have that FOMO.
Well, this is where you shift actually from seeing Italy to really experiencing it.
Right. I have this tagline, I think I've used a couple of times is first you explore Italy and then you enjoy Italy.
Yes, that's a really nice tagline, Tanya.
But, in this case, how things work. You've seen the highlights and now you've chosen where to slow down. And now you're slowing down because you want to, not because somebody told you to.
Yeah. I mean, how many times we traveled and explored places and then we said, oh, this is really nice here. This is fabulous here. And then we went back and just spent either a weekend or the whole week there.
No, exactly. Because I feel too, if you did this on your first trip, you're afraid to invest too much time or money in a place that you're not familiar with and maybe you get it wrong. So the first time you explore a little bit and then understand what really was your vibe, what you want to see more of. And it's a little bit less risky to go back a second time and chill.
Exactly. So, okay. Now we get to the third trip, Tanya.
Or the fourth, or the fifth.
Or the fifth.
So really, though, once you've been here a couple of times, this is when you start to add in the destinations we just talked about in our last episode of Matera, Basilicata, Calabria, Le Marche, Abruzzo. These are the places that have the smaller towns. They're more rural, really fewer tourists. But to be ready for them, like you're like the shift that you need to prepare for is you need to have like that confidence of international travel. You need to be a bit more independent, a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty because there's just less everything figured out for you.
You need to figure things out on the go, basically.
Right. Like things are less structured. And so
that also requires maybe to learn a little bit of the language,
Right. I mean, there's going to be less English being spoken in these less touristy areas. They don't get the exposure. So you might need to rent a car, as you mentioned before. You need to be independent. And these places are going to feel a little bit more rustic and less polished. And, I liken it to like I should say my extended family is from rural Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's very rustic. They grew up on farms. Like I spent my summers on farms and my cousins would laugh at me as being that city slicker because I lived in the cities. But I got very comfortable. And so I think for me, like whenever we go to these more rural places, they have that culture and they're rustic and you got to be comfortable with that. And I don't know, I just feel like overall these are the areas where, easing into the pool idea really comes into play because by this point you've gotten through the shallow end and the wading pool and you're ready to dive in.
Yeah.
Maybe jump off a cliff.
Yes, exactly. But a lot of people jumped that cliff and actually stayed here. So we know a lot of the expats that came to Italy for so many years, and then they decided to actually stay here, to live here. And many of those expats are actually living in those rural places, the off the beaten path places, and for a reason.
They're beautiful. I'm just saying, it's never like not to do these things. It's just deciding when is the right time to do these things. And if it's the right fit for you and if it's the right fit for what is motivating you to come to Italy in the first place. And I also want to say, like, I've talked about these as like your first trip, your second trip, and your third trip, but this isn't a strict formula. Like you can mix elements of the three depending on your travel style. But I've just found that thinking about it in this way helps people design a trip that feels right. So instead of trying to do everything at once, really think about what you're wanting from the trip and what you're ready for.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to feel more natural to you. You're going to be more confident and you're going to be more comfortable with it.
Exactly. And, just to further explain this topic, I have some examples I wanted to go through because I see this play out all the time with different clients, and which is why I feel so strongly about it because on paper, a lot of these ideas sound great. Like, again, we don't disagree with any of these trends, but when you actually start applying them to a real trip with real people and real logistics, that's when the differences and the challenges show up. So let's go through some examples.
Okay.
The first story is, might be the sounds great, but doesn't fit. And so this was a family of 5, 3 young kids. And the parents had been to Italy a couple of times, maybe just Florence and Rome. And they wanted to come back and have this immersive off the beaten path experience. And, the dad was very upfront with me. He's like, I've seen all these things on TikTok and I've been watching YouTube videos. And he's like, I just really want to show the kids cultural, authentic Italy. And I'm like, awesome. And I'm like, what do you have in mind? He's like, well, I think I want to do a week in Tuscany, like really just stay at a rustic farm with a lot of animals. Then maybe we should do Puglia for a week, or could we go off to Sicily for a week? And I was like, well, okay, wow.
Well, what happened?
Well, I mean, as I do, I walked through the logistics. I show a lot of visuals and kind of just said, this is going to take some effort. Like you'll have to rent a car. You're going to have a lot more driving. Things are a little bit more distant from each other. And, with 3 kids in a car doing this, it started to feel like maybe this was potentially more stressful than what he had in mind. And so, and what sounds good maybe feels different in reality.
Well, sometimes an idea of a trip is very different than what you experience.
Right. I mean, you have to actually get from place to place.
Yes, exactly.
And think about the people who are traveling with you, which may, voice some complaints about what is going on. So anyway, we designed the trip a little differently in the end from where we started and made it a little bit more traditional and easy.
Okay, cool.
So anyway, now I have another example about Ischia. And, I have a couple. They chose Ischia to have like this romantic getaway, and they were inspired by our Ischia episode. And we had lots of conversations about it. And they're like, wow, I love this idea of, a little bit off the beaten path, not as touristy as Capri, time on the beach or, in the thermal spas that we talked about. But then as we were going through like each day and they started like, well, my friends are telling us about Positano and the great time they had in Positano. And they were just like, hey, I'm having this FOMO. Like, can we fit in Positano? Like, should we go? Like, am I going to hate myself from not going? And then, I forget which of them spoke up and said in our, Zoom call of, hey, wait. We said this from the beginning. We wanted something a little bit different. We wanted to go off the beaten path. And so we need to do our trip, not somebody else's trip.
Yes.
And that was the mic drop, right? Like,
boom.
This was, true self-awareness, being confident in your decision. And you need to, filter out some of that noise. And
yeah, I mean, that's the mindset shift you want. I mean, don't do someone else's trip. Do your trip.
Right. Back to your point before, like, what was the attraction? Why did you come here? Like, stay true to that. Don't get pushed into something else because somebody else is making you have FOMO.
Yes.
So now I have another example, and this is a much, more minor scale of figuring out what you want and what is right for you. But I've had a couple of clients that along the Amalfi Coast, and everyone's like, what's your recommendation of the best city? And we had our Amalfi Coast episode and we talked about each one, and I caved and I think said which one I thought was, my favorite for different reasons. But, I have a client who was just there this last weekend, and they were texting me and saying, oh my gosh, this is the most visually beautiful place like they had ever been. And they were thrilled with their decision. And of course, I'm happy that they're happy. And they're like, oh my God, it's amazing. I love Positano. And I just had to chuckle because just a few months ago, like back in the fall, I had a different client who, when we talked about what was their ideal place to base camp, and it was like, it sounds like Ravello. It seems like your vibe, what you're more after, a little bit off the beaten path, and just do a day trip to Positano, right? And so, but they talked to friends and they're like, oh, and at the last minute, they came to me and said, oh, we talked to friends. And they're telling us like they had an amazing time in Positano and, should we stay in Positano? And I'm like, no, but you guys, like, I really feel strongly that this is going to be the better fit for you. And so they stuck to it. Actually, one of them was more wanting Ravello anyway. And at the end, they said, after our day trip to Positano, we are so glad we did not stay there. It was way too many stairs. It was not our vibe. And I'm like, phew, okay, I was right to kind of like listen to them and say, what you're telling me is Ravello. Don't get swayed by your friends. And I don't know. Again, so this is just an example of the exact same destination, completely different experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily what's best for other people. In general, it's going to be best what's best for you. So you need to find what is best for me.
Right, exactly. So. And, that's really the point of all of this discussion is that when you step back and look at these factors and all of the things we've been talking about, like it really comes down to a few simple things. Understanding why you want to go to Italy in the first place. Understanding the different ways you can experience it, fast or slow. Being honest about what actually fits you. What's your style of travel? Do you like to sit by the pool? Do you want to be jumping cliffs? Do you want to be running around? And what's your comfort level? Like, where are you in your journey as a traveler? Because again, some people have done tons of international travel. And I've had friends of ours who have done this with us, or expats or people in Switzerland, like, why are people making such a big deal about this? Just get on a plane and go to Italy. Like, why do they even hire you?
It's different.
And I'm like, not everybody has grown up with like all this international travel and exposure. So for many of my clients, it's their first trip out of the country. And that's a little bit scary when you haven't done it. So anyway, because, there just isn't one right way to do Italy.
It just needs to be right for you.
No, and we can't say that enough times. And, my job is exactly that. It's to help match your vision for the trip with your travel style, your comfort level, and the people you're traveling with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just making an example for us. You have planned all of our trips as a family, and you had to fit all of our sort of travel styles together.
And quirks.
And okay, because you said you like to explore. I like to relax. So when you planned our trips, you made sure that there was always a moment to relax for a day or two, but then go on and do more exploring on a trip. So I think when you plan a trip to Italy, my recommendation is do not follow trends, but do follow what is best for you. So
perfectly said.
Thank you. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode already, but as usual, we don't leave you without tips from Tanya. Tips from Tanya.
Thanks, Davide. Well, we've got a couple of great tips that I think just reiterate the key takeaways of this episode. And the first one is, start with the experience, not the itinerary. Before you start mapping out cities and hotels and the logistics, take a step back and think about what you actually want the trip to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
What are the feelings you want to have when you're experiencing Italy? And do you want it to feel active and exploratory? Do you want it to be relaxed and restorative? Is it more about spending time with family and just having that downtime? Or maybe it's about the culture and the history and seeing as many museums that you can possibly see. And, or some people have like this personal connection to Italy because of, their ancestry.
Right.
And they want to connect with a certain town. But at the end of the day, it's really what everyone's coming here for. It's not just the places, it's the feeling of being here. So once you're clear on that, the rest of the decisions become so much easier. And, Italy is magical, but what that magic feels like is different for everyone.
That's well said, Tanya. I agree with you. So
thank you, Davide. I love your approval. So let's go into tip number 2. Use inspiration, but filter it. And there's so much great content out there online. And our podcast included. Like, we hope all of this inspires you for your trip, but it's important to remember that what worked for someone else may not be the right fit for you. And you have different travel styles, different priorities, different expectations, different readiness levels, as we've talked about. So take inspiration from what you're seeing, but don't feel like you need to follow it exactly. And, let the ideas inspire you, but don't let them define your trip.
Wow. Another tagline.
I'm getting good at this, Davide.
Yeah.
Okay. Last tip, give yourself permission to keep it simple, especially on your first trip. Like, there's a lot of pressure to do everything, see everything, and get it exactly right. But you don't have to. Like, Italy is a place you can come back to again and again. And I will assure you that you will want to come back again. So it's okay to keep things simple. Focus on a few places, leave room to just enjoy where you are. So you don't have to do it all. Just do what feels right.
All right.
So, overall, when you approach your trip this way, it becomes a lot less about doing it right and a lot more about creating an experience that you'll actually enjoy.
Yeah. And that's, spending all that energy, time, and money. I think you want it right for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was a really interesting episode, Tanya. I think it was an important one, because you told me what inspired this episode was that your client had always the same questions.
Yeah.
And I think you had the need to, okay, let's get this out of the way. And let's educate our audience about, planning a trip to Italy.
But also not feeling overly swayed by everything that you're seeing online. Because I was sort of reacting to, like, you have to do it this way. Like if you do it the classic way, if you go to the touristy places, somehow you're doing it wrong. And that you are falling into like the same old, and you're going to do all the touristy things and it won't be enjoyable. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to do classic Italy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to see these iconic places, but there is definitely high quality and lower quality. And that's where good planning and good advice comes into play, is to find those high quality, authentic, to the degree that you can handle authentic.
Exactly.
But knowing what you're comfortable for. So, but overall, I mean, talking about all of this, I hope it really reflects how I think about travel. You know, that's evolved over time. And it was fun to reflect back on some of the conversations I've had with clients and, you know, really understand that the most meaningful trips aren't about following a trend or checking a box, but creating something that actually fits you. And it really shows why I love doing this so much, because every trip is different, and helping people design something that matches what they're looking for. Like, that's when the magic really happens, both for them and for me, as I get to observe that and go, yes, I got it. You know, they're having the time of their life.
Yeah, because I love when you tell me that when your clients text you, oh my God, Tanya, this is exactly what I envisioned. And I mean, it's a compliment. And I think, you know, people want that. They want to come here and have this perfect trip, you know, but not.
Again, it's perfect for them. Like, and so it's like, what were you envisioning? And I really, the goal for me is to achieve that vision.
I mean, my key takeaways from this episode is, first one is, do not plan someone else's trip, plan your trip. And then the second one is, there's no right way to do Italy. There's just a way that's right for you.
Bravo, Davide.
Ma bello, eh?
Do Italy your way. I wonder what we're going to title the episode.
Grazie. Well, thank you everyone for spending time with us today. I hope it was very useful again. Make sure to check out our Facebook page group, Experience Italy with Friends. If you still have questions, just post away. I will
exactly.
answer.
Reach out, and really thank you all for listening. I really enjoyed this topic and sharing my perspective. So I hope it was useful for all of you, and enjoy spring. Hope you all had a great holiday weekend, and arrivederci.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. We hope you've enjoyed Experience Italy with Friends. If you like the podcast, remember to follow us and leave a review letting us know what you found to be the most helpful. And if you want expert advice or assistance in creating your own immersive and authentic experience in Italy, visit us at www.amicivacations.com.